This is Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. You probably know it better as New Zealand. It's a land of incredible beauty that speaks for itself. I'm Warren Miller, and I often describe New Zealand as just like California was in the mid-1930s, full of fantastic scenery and wonderful people. Let's take a look. And a good way to take a look is with the Mount Cook Air Force. They have a plane waiting just for you to see a country 2/3 the size of California with 1/3 the population of Los Angeles. I first filmed and skied in New Zealand during August of 1968. I've been back many times since because the winter ski season down here is during our summer, July, August, and September. The snow on the Tasman glaciers is deep as 900 feet. And today, there's so many resorts in New Zealand that almost everyone you see has taken up the sport. Hotels, mostly small. And when you check in, they give you a free bottle of milk to go with your free morning tea. New Zealand has a lot of quaint little farm towns, but Auckland is a city of almost 1 million people. And it reminds me a lot of San Francisco or Vancouver, British Columbia. With the seasons reversed, summer's in December, January, and February. And make sure you save some shopping money when you come here, because there are prices that you have to see to believe. And honest people, when was the last time you saw an open stack of newspapers with an open cash box? Auckland has miles and miles of waterfront, which is why they call it the City of Sails. And underneath the harbor is the world's most unique aquarium, built by Kelly Tarleton. You move through a tunnel made of 2-inch thick plexiglass on an automatic sidewalk, so you don't even have to think about walking. I think New Zealand's way ahead of the world in a lot of areas. This, of course, is one. Another is the preservation of the past. Houses are seldom torn down. Instead, they're kept up. It's much easier. There are many ways they cling to the past. For example,
when we deliver milk in New Zealand, we have the personal touch.
Home milk delivery was finished in America many years ago because no one wanted to get up at dawn and deliver it. Here, young, future world-class athletes get paid while they work out in the afternoon. It's not unusual to see a 1929 Model A Ford in perfect condition driving on the streets of Auckland. In fact, you'll see a great many vintage cars in fine working order. And Harold Stone could be behind the wheel of more than one of them.
New Zealanders tend to keep their cars much longer than any other countries in the world. In the city of Auckland, there is a vintage car club with in excess of 600 members. Every member has at least one car. I have 8 cars of my own.
I felt right at home spending part of my holiday in a camper van, because I've driven a van all over North America since 1950. But here, I met a lot of newcomers to camper van living.
Well, I've never driven a camper in California, but the parks here, when you come to find a camper van place to put it for the night, are great. They have electricity you plug in, and water and kitchens. It's really tremendous.
It is really tremendous, if you don't try the mushrooms. One bite of this one, and you're history.
Our children really enjoy speaking with the other children.
And this family had so many kids, they had to keep remodeling their van.
We've met more people, I think, because we brought them. There aren't any crowds. That's what I notice most of all. You walk down the street and you have the whole place to yourself, the roads you have to yourself.
Oh yes, a word of caution. You better learn quickly that you've spent your whole life in North America driving on the wrong side of the road. Here, it's easy to drive a dozen miles or so and not pass a car in either direction. I really like it here. It's as far away as you can get from the crowds, and there's no litter anywhere. But you have to stay alert. And concrete here is in short supply, but iron is not. On hundreds of bays or lakes in New Zealand, when the second boat shows up, it's a crowded day. This is a crowded day. In some places, the only way to get around is by boat. At the northern end of the country, in the Bay of Islands, there's an island for every day of the year. Russell, though, can be reached by car. And Russell is one of my favorite places for a lot of reasons. It's an hour by car from the nearest city, or 15 minutes by boat. Another thing I like about these small towns is the opportunity to invest in some real estate.
The Gables had a varied life. It was built in 1847 for an English cobbler who came out here with his family. He bought the land for £30 from the Maori chief.
That's less than $100.
He built it as a home. It's been a restaurant for about 14 years. We've made some really close friends out of Americans. We had one couple who owned a vineyard in the Napa Valley, and so they were interested in trying all our different New Zealand wines.
Several Americans have stayed and they've started vineyards. And they've been able to grow varietal wines that you won't find in any other warm country in the world. Skipper Gary Cole's been fishing in the Bay of Islands for 15 years. What does he go after?
Striped marlin's our main fish here. It's well renowned for its striped marlin, and we have a lot of world records here, and that's what people come here for.
Zane Grey fished all over the world and said, and I quote, "There's no better place to find the big ones than out of Europuka-puka," which is an old Maori word that translated means, make sure you bring your wide-angle lens so you can get a photo of the big ones you caught today.
Well, it's a big event in the evening to see the fish weighed in.
New Zealand holds the world's record for striped marlin, 457 pounds. The first New Zealand settlers were the Maori, who came south from the Central Pacific Islands, and it was a long paddle. Today, it takes 72 paddlers to transport 6 passengers. And they were followed by a Greenpeace kayak to make sure this wasn't a war canoe. The Maori culture has been recorded in wood carving since they first arrived on these shores hundreds of years ago. The craft's been handed down from father to son, and many of the carvings are preserved in the meeting house in the marae, like this one in Rotorua. Here, every morning in the old days, someone would go to the thermal pools and soft-boil eggs for breakfast, wearing a cape of 10,000 feathers. Maori legend has it that one feather was added for each breakfast that was properly prepared. And today, the Maori, not unlike the American Indians, are preserving a culture and a language that's found nowhere else in the world.
No mai, haere mai. Tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Which translates to welcome. In the thermal region in central New Zealand near Lake Taupo, this thermal plant at Waioriki produces 157 megawatts of electrical energy per year. That was about 2% of the energy necessary to run the entire country before the invention of the hairdryer. Here you have the feeling that you're standing on Earth about 600 million years ago. In the last 100 years, little has changed. The original settlers wisely capitalized on the curative powers of the boiling hot water gushing right out of the ground. And the pools today haven't changed, but the customers have. And I, for one, am glad for this kind of change. And just as they were 100 years or so ago, the local ladies are out on the green 2 or 3 afternoons a week with a combination of Italian bocce ball and American bowling for dollars. Sports? The New Zealanders certainly are. Cricket's a game that I've never been able to understand, but I just holler whenever anyone else does. And commercialism hasn't messed up the sport here. There's no designer-labeled tennis shoes required. How about your choice of over 400 golf courses with a green fee that averages about $5 American, and you can hook your drive on any of them? At this hang gliding school, they keep a string on you. That's so you won't fly higher than you care to fall. I've spent most of my life searching for uncrowded beaches, and there are more here than anyone can enjoy in a lifetime. Take your pick of sports and plan at least a month's vacation if you want to get them all in. On the Shotover River, you can get scared to death for less than the cost of dinner for 2 in your favorite restaurant. Did you know that the jet boat was invented by a New Zealander who was too lazy to walk to his favorite fishing ground? Many of New Zealand's ski fields are just a few minutes' drive from warm water lakes, so you can snow ski in the morning and water ski in the afternoon. And fishing, wow. First time I fished here 20 years ago, I caught 9 trout over 10 pounds each, and that was in the first 2 hours. Remember, it's crowded when the second boat shows up. And don't forget that in many regions of New Zealand, any fish under 14 inches long has to be thrown back. In any fishing story, these are what you would call keepers, each about 14 pounds. It's illegal to catch and sell trout in New Zealand, so if you want broiled trout for dinner, you have to catch them yourself.
We are happy to prepare it for you. And I've cooked trout for many an American.
And many a pavlova, which is the national dessert. And half a pound of pavlova is guaranteed to convert to half a pound of hips. And you can buy these great desserts almost anywhere, because there's a tea room around almost every corner in every town in the country. And a daily ritual is high tea, or Devonshire tea. 600-calorie scones, strawberry preserves, whipped cream, and plenty of high-calorie fresh New Zealand butter. During the summer months, December, January, and February, you can find an agriculture and pastoral show every weekend. Put one of these on your vacation schedule and see how the world lived in the 1920s. These shows and contests are for everyone, and safety shoes are not required. You can find almost anything you want at these shows. There's a lot of betting on who can shear a six-pack of sheep the fastest. These agricultural and pastoral shows, or A&P shows, are a real turning back the clock time. Back to when you were 14 years old and you could go round and round for a dime. Today, with inflation, it's up to a quarter. New Zealand's the safest country I've ever visited. The policemen wear no guns, carry no mace. Here, there's no need for anyone to get out of line. And besides, almost every store in the country closes at noon on Saturdays, so everyone can be at home with their families for the weekend. The most English city in the world outside of England is Christchurch. And regardless of your religious faith, you should stop and listen to the Cathedral Boys Choir. And in downtown Christchurch, a couple of New Zealand entrepreneurs brought over some English craftsmen to create punts. Now you can go punting on the Avon. Here they call anything after the 7th grade college. And Clyde Tucker tells it like it is in a school that builds character. There's no wimps here.
I'm a day boy. There are about 350 day boys here and about 250 boarders. We study German, Latin, French, English, math, biology, chemistry and physics.
And he's only 13 years old.
We do Harriers, which is running, rowing, which I do, cricket, soccer, rugby, all the usual sports.
What's your 13-year-old studying? The home garden's a very important part of the lifestyle here in Christchurch. It's a rare day that someone in the family isn't out tending to their plants, and Ron Coker is no exception.
Over the years, the garden, which comprises 2 acres, has been filled with plants, and the big problem at the present time, of course, is if you buy a new plant or produce a new plant, where can you find a home for it in the garden? These rhododendrons originated in America. They came from Seattle. We have sent cuttings of our rhododendrons to America, and I always feel that there is quite a tie between America and New Zealand through the exchange of cuttings.
And Mrs. Catherine Howman is the best lawnmower in her block.
Through the Beautifying Association, that was when I first started to show the garden. That's a voluntary organisation. I really do enjoy showing it. Nearly every day there's someone calls either to ask me some questions or see something in the garden.
I much prefer a low-maintenance rock garden, like this one on the east coast of the South Island.
Here in New Zealand, we grow the finest kiwi fruit in the world.
And until you've had a kiwi fruit fresh off of a tree made into a kiwi parfait, you haven't had a kiwi fruit fresh off of a tree made into a kiwi parfait. Now, if you're budget-minded or you want to get away from everything, you can really see New Zealand from the seat of a bicycle.
You can go 100 kilometers a day, or you could go 30 kilometers a day, depending on what you feel like. There's a van that will pick up your bike and your body, if you'd like.
Which is quite necessary at times.
Some of us go a long distance, others don't go quite as long. So it's suitable for everyone. They stay at everything from motels to luxury hotels to farmhouses. It all adds together to just a marvelous holiday.
If you don't mind sweating. In New Plymouth, I watched the annual life-saving competition with teams from all over New Zealand and Australia too. Some of the competitions are in boats that have changed very little since someone invented the oarlock. There must have been at least 1,000 competitors in this championship event, all of them amateur lifeguards. They worked the beaches as volunteers totally without pay. Of course, a few of them are trust funders. Remember, the object is to get to the victims as soon as possible, so someone invented the surf ski, which is very fast, but very tippy. And when the rescues get tougher, they go for the more modern boats with oarlocks. With more freeboard, these bigger boats can handle rougher water, and with a larger crew, they can get there faster. Just above some of these great beaches are farms like this one that's owned by Rana and Gary Symes. They have about 2,000 acres or so of land, 3,000 head of sheep, and a spare bedroom with a view that's worth about $200 million. There are several thousand farms like this in New Zealand that will rent you a room with 3 meals. Granted, not all of them have a view like this one, where you can pick your dinner right off of the rocks in the front yard at low tide. And an hour later, you can have mussels au gratin.
Come on, let go. Let go. Let go.
Rana and Gary run the farm alone, and she still finds time to spin the shorn wool and knit her own sweaters. It's very simple to find the time here since they don't have cable TV.
I'm actually spinning a fleece that's taken a year to grow. And as I have the choice of about 3,000 fleeces, I usually get a good one without prickles and dirt.
Set some of your vacation time aside and spend it on a farm, because if you don't, you'll only be 1 year older when you do. From the Bay of Islands in the north to the fjords in the south of the South Island, it's a country that you have to experience to believe. And one of the most famous places to experience it is in the Milford Trek.
We always like to try and find a place that, as far as we know, doesn't have too many people visiting it. In fact, we tend to get a bit resentful, don't we, if we hear somebody else coming or
Yes.
can see someone else coming up the valley.
Normally you, in the Central Mountains, you can own the whole valley system. You're the only ones there. And if someone else turns up, you feel like they're intruders.
It's a 4-day trek from Queenstown to Milford. If you're short of time, you can fly here from Queenstown in about a half an hour for an awesome view of Mitre Peak and Bowen Falls. One foggy morning in Dunedin, I woke up to the plaintive call of the bagpipes. And it's obvious that the early settlers didn't come from Italy. From out of the fog rose Larnock Castle, built in 1871 in an attempt to bring some old world charm to this new country. And if you visit it on a summer morning in February, you can almost hear the ghost of Bobby Burns. But get down here as soon as you can, because in the larger cities, the moral fiber of the younger generation is slowly being eroded by American television. Today, hot dogs. Before you know it, skateboards. Fine dining? How about five-star service with a bit of gypsy music, and you'll promise each other anything. But just promise each other to come back and see more of this land, like Queenstown on the shore of Lake Wakatipu and the Earnslaw. It's 60 meters of steam-powered freighter that burns a ton of coal an hour. Built and launched in 1912, it's been in daily operation ever since. Lake Wakatipu is almost 70 miles long, and there's only one town with 3,000 people on its shores. Lake Wakatipu has a mysterious 3-inch high tide every half hour. Actually, the lake is stationary. The land moves up and down. The first settlers discovered this place about 10 years after gold was discovered in California. That would make it about 1860. It was soon thereafter that Joe Otagie found 11 pounds of gold on the Shotover River.
The old gold miners thought they got it all. There's a lot of places here you can still, with a bit of luck, you can still get half an ounce in a week. Still plenty left, if you can find it.
Many Americans came down here on the heels of the California gold rush, and so you'll find their songs, their names, and their histories throughout the country. I've been all over the world many times, and New Zealand is the only place in the world that I'll go visit at the drop of a hat. Oh yes, I'm Warren Miller, and if you see me with my camera in New Zealand, just wave. You just might be in my next movie.
You have a beautiful country, but wait till you see ours.
And it's difficult to imagine any one country as friendly, as beautiful, as familiar, and yet different. But set the time aside and get down here now, because if you don't, you'll be 1 year older when you do.